All right. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully you also are able to see the PowerPoint. I'm going to walk through tonight some of the main points in the email that I had distributed last weekend, and also for folks who are in the CWA 540 class, you should have received that a second email today. I want to start off and say, on behalf of all of us in the Department of Counselor Education, we are thinking about each of you and your families in this difficult time. I know, this afternoon I heard from one of our students whose family member has unfortunately been diagnosed with COVID-19 and is in not great health. And so I am certainly thinking of her. This is one of our CSP students and a family member. So it's very much connected. And I know that all of us are trying to do the best that we can with the information that we have about this pandemic. And I know all of us want to continue to be supportive and helpful through these very difficult times. So I'm sending lots of love and light out to all of you and all of our students who cannot make it to this particular session but might be watching it later. So again, thank you for being here and taking some time on this Friday evening to walk through. I want to start off as well just to say, I know that there are still a lot of questions, and I wish that in some cases I had more answers. But what we're going to walk through tonight are some of the key points in the emails, and then maybe even a little bit more additional information and clarity. Additionally, there will be time after I walk through this presentation to answer any additional questions. My hope is that these will be broad level questions that might not necessarily be super specific to the individual. I may refer you, if you have individual questions, to reach out to both myself and your university supervisor, whoever's teaching your fieldwork class, so that way we can jointly work with you on your individual cases, because I know everybody is in a different spot. But hopefully some of the broader more global questions we can attempt to answer in our time together. This is, again, being recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube, saved to the Resources for Students page on the Grad School of Ed website under Counselor Education section. So we will have that available, and we will also email out the link to all of our PPS fieldwork students. So I'm going to move us to the first and perhaps the biggest piece that we're still waiting on in some ways. The CTC, I know there has been conversations in my previous emails about what do we know from the CTC and what is available to us. So what we do know as of late this week is that the CTC is working, of course, with the governor's office and the legislature to review what options will be available for programs in terms of credentialing and moving forward. So those of you who are graduating this May, or graduating this summer or this fall, you may have very specific questions, and I understand that. I'm going to share a little bit more about the variable term waiver, which has been announced, and we will talk a little bit more about what that means for some of you if you take advantage of that. But we do know that some of the additional questions in terms of loosening requirement hours or testing, some of those decisions are not yet in play and have to wait until the CTC's April meeting. Additionally, I want to also specify is that a lot of these program standards that we have for PPS, the difficulty here is that many of them are in the California Educational Code. So they're actual legislative approved pieces that we have to make sure that we abide by. So we don't, as a program, have a ton of flexibility in terms of some of those requirements. And so that's why we are having to wait for the CTC to work in combination with the legislature and the governor's office to try to move forward and seeing what will come as guidance around some of these areas. So again, just wanting to sort of iterate that the CTC cannot just unilaterally, nor can we as a program, program and the department unilaterally change some of these pieces because they are connected to your credentials. And so that's a key piece that I just want to share. I do want to talk a little bit more about the variable term waiver and what this is. And so as I had sort of alluded to in my email to everybody about 528, 533, and 534 last weekend, the CTC is moving forward on a variable term waiver. This allows candidates additional time to complete credential requirements while able to provide services for which they've been prepared. What this really means is that folks who haven't met the hour requirement or a condition of the credential in a normal year are able to receive or apply for a variable term waiver, which allows them to be hired by school districts and complete work that they normally would be doing, in our case, as school counselors, right? So you will not have a PPS credential yet if you do not meet all of our requirements, but you can be applied for and be recommended for a variable term waiver through our credentialing office. And this will allow you to then be able to be hired by a school district with the understanding that then you have 1 year to complete all of the other requirements that you didn't yet do. So if you are in a case where your school site will not be reopening, that your site supervisor is not allowing you to do any online counseling for your students, and so you may fall short of your 600 hours required for graduation and required for the credential, and you only have 500, let's say, then ultimately you can receive the variable term waiver, and then you can, what you will be expected to do is do 100 hours on site that then would be reported to us as a program and then to Christina Soria as the credential analyst, and then be recommended for your full credential. So we are still awaiting from the CTC how the process needs to be aligned. And so I'm not able today to give you all of what that process will look like yet, but we will notify you once that is established and clearer. And then from there, you will have options to be able to move forward. So those of you who are graduating, I know this is a very stressful part, and I understand that, but there will be an option for you if you fall short of the required hours or other components for you to do the variable term waiver. I also know that a couple of you may also have fallen into the same issue with the CBEST basic skills. Typically, you know that this is an expectation that folks have completed that prior to moving forward to practicum or field studies. And unfortunately, that became a blip, and some of you have not yet been able to pass that. And additionally, that's also caused issue because testing centers are now closed given social distancing. And so what the guideline that we have received from the CTC says is that if there are also testing components that are required for you for your credentialing, that also applies here in terms of the variable term waiver. Now, I have raised the question to Dean Hillis, who has also raised the question then with members of the CTC of if basic skills for CBEST counts in this. We're awaiting a final decision and answers back on that. But I do want to say that it is a possibility that that also may be counted, so that way, if that is also a piece that you have not yet done, you may be eligible, again, you may be eligible, it's not a guarantee, to still be able to apply for the variable term waiver, and you would need to then pass CBEST basic skills within a year from now. And then if that's the case, then you would be eligible to be recommended for your full PPS credential. So these are some pieces. The CTC outlined that institutions who wish to participate in the variable term waiver needed to notify by April 10th. Dean Hillis has already issued that to the CTC, so they are well aware that Cal Lutheran is wanting to take advantage for its students to have the variable term waiver as an option. So that it will be included in the April agenda for the CTC, hopefully for us to be approved. I anticipate that they will approve all institutions who are notifying them that they wish to make the variable term waiver available to their students. So again, I do see that as a very clear possibility moving forward for our students who are looking to graduate and still wish to be employed come fall semester. So I'm going to just, again, reiterate some of the decisions that the department then made around 528, 533, and 534 first. I will talk about 540 towards the end of this PowerPoint slide. So one of the big things that the CTC has allowed programs to do is make changes than what is currently in their documented program of study plan. So we have an entire binder that outlines what our program is and what it needs to follow in terms of everything having to do with curriculum, including fieldwork. The department faculty members met to talk about how can we loosen up some of these requirements to allow for additional alternatives for students to be able to move forward in counting hours and accruing hours in this time period. So that is why we as a faculty sent out that message to you, letting you know that ultimately out of your required hours, 50% do need to be in the individual, group, personal, and social counseling or academic and career counseling categories. This would include you doing this directly or observing other counselors and staff doing this type of work. Again, I think for many students, the title of counseling might also be a little bit specific and maybe feel a little narrow. So one of the things that I've been sharing with folks who have contacted me one-on-one is if you are using counseling skills in your practice, individually, meeting with students, talking with family members, you are potentially helping to run a group, all of those pieces count. If you are supervised, some of you are doing practicum at college and universities, so if you helped facilitate supervision of student workers, that could count, right? So you're having conversations, you're doing work that is definitely one-on-one in nature, you're drawing on your counseling skills. And additionally, for those of you in practicum, so not those of you in 533 or 534, unfortunately, but those of you in practicum may also count observation hours done as an assignment in previous semesters. So some of you may have had an instructor in 526 that required you to do an observation. Some of you in 527 may have needed to connect with a student and do some academic advising with them for one of your signature assignments in that class. These are the types of hours that can be counted additional in terms of this area. The other 25% of your hours just for this semester can be around program development and evaluation, and can be, the other 25% can be around professional development opportunities such as webinars and other pieces that you may be able to find online. Lots of folks are recording webinars and posting them for viewing, so even if you can't make it then, watching them later. The ASCA on Air webinar series, the hatching results tutorial classes, these are different options. And again, you may find others than what I have even shared out. And so that's great. And I encourage you, if you find something, to share it with a colleague and a friend, and check in with your university supervisors, meaning the folks teaching your fieldwork classes, to just double check and make sure that it's okay for you to use those and those would be appropriate for you. The other piece too is your university supervisors have some flexibility around some of these hour percentages based upon your own specific situations. So I encourage you to consult with them about questions and concerns that you might have. This becomes an important piece. So we are, again, we're not able to change the hour requirements for your fieldwork, as those requirements are written into the educational code. But we've attempted to provide these options to allow you to count hours that still provide solid knowledge and information for you to be prepared as PPS counselors. And we're going to continue as a department to explore additional options if needed to assist you in accruing hours. But again, some of this is that we're still waiting from the CTC what's happening and some of the other guidance. So again, this is what we have sort of outlined as a first step. There may be additional conversations that we come back and say and we offer, but we are trying to do as much as possible given some of the information that we have. So again, I want to sort of reiterate, we are still monitoring this. We will still be in touch with you. We will still work with you on a case-by-case basis, and also to the larger group and collective to try to resolve some of the concerns that I know you're raising. I know it's tough, particularly when we have folks who are parents who then are now having to help educate their children at home, and so time is tight, and we understand there are also folks who have family members that they're having to take care of. Time is short, and we understand that. One of the things that we certainly have as an option, and I want to stress this, is that students, particularly any student in 528, 533, and 534, if you wish, you can take an incomplete and come back and do hours in the fall when things hopefully will be better. This is, of course, more of an option for folks in 528. As long as you have a site supervisor who is willing and allows you to come in and count additional hours and continue your work, that certainly is an option. You can do that even while you are in 533, as long as you have the time available to do that. But again, we are bound in many ways by what the education code says, and so we can't alter that until we hear from the CTC and the governor's office that there is a change in this. And so I just want to stress what our ability to sort of make changes is and how limited that is in terms of what it means for your credential. I do know that somebody wrote in on the chat, there's a lot of different things that I'm having to monitor right now on my screen. We will have an opportunity for folks to share and ask questions at the end after I go over all this information. So just hang tight with your question. I promise we will allow for time for folks to ask questions in just a few minutes. Additionally, an update that I wanted to share is that we do require for all of our fieldwork, each candidate must have at least one site visit that's completed. This is preferable to have your university supervisor, whoever's teaching your fieldwork class, to observe you demonstrating skills in the field, but we understand that might not be possible right now. And we also know that even doing it in a virtual or online format may not be possible. And so at the very least, we are requiring that every candidate, their site supervisor, and their university supervisor must come together for a short conference that can be done either by phone or it can be done via video conferencing, and that needs to be documented in the site visit form. All of our fieldwork faculty members understand this and know this. These site visits don't have to happen today or tomorrow, right? This can happen anytime over the next several weeks until mid-May, until the end of the semester. So we understand right now there are a lot of folks that are technically on spring break. There are a lot of folks whose site supervisors are having to really adjust and just haven't been able to respond back to emails or phone calls in terms of understanding what you can do. We understand that. And so what I would just say is, as anxious as that can be for us when we don't get a response back, is just to have a little bit of patience and to then follow up in a couple of days, maybe mid next week, to just check in and see what the plans are going forward and how you can hopefully move forward. Hopefully by early May, folks might have a little bit more of a rhythm and a pattern of their work and might be able to just spend 15, 20 minutes to do this, this conference for you. I anticipate that folks hopefully down the line will be able to take the time and do that. We also will try to reach out to site supervisors on your behalf if there are concerns of folks not actually connecting or responding back. So if that is the case, I encourage you to either reach out to myself or reach out to your fieldwork supervisor if there is a lapse in communication that's been ongoing, and we will try to facilitate ways to check in with the site supervisor and see what are plans moving forward to ensure that you can move forward or to get some direction there. So I just want to also offer that. Additionally, as I asked early on, I did ask for folks to have a formative evaluation to be completed by their supervisor, regardless of where they were with their hours. And a part of this is to understand and to basically advocate to the CTC if students are doing well and meeting competency in some of the areas that they are performing their skills. That helps us to make a case to then be able to say these students are actually have the knowledge and the competency areas determined and demonstrated to be able to move forward. This is helpful particularly for folks who have and will take advantage of the variable term waiver that I mentioned about at the beginning of this presentation. And so again, we're only requiring folks to have one evaluation this semester. Typically we ask for the formative and the summative. The caveat to that is if a site supervisor indicates a somewhat of a low score in one or a couple of areas, we may ask through the university supervisor to have a follow-up conversation with the site supervisor, the candidate, and the university supervisor about the skill sets and that particular area, and if things have strengthened, if they're allowed to continue and do online counseling and online services at their site. We know, again, that's going to be dependent upon every single person and their unique situation. But again, my hope is that for most folks, they are demonstrating good skills, solid work, and that this won't be an issue for too many individuals. I'm going to switch my attention just quickly to 540. I'm going to take a sip of water too. Sorry about that. So for 540 students, those doing the CWA fieldwork course, out of the total 150 total hours, 90 of those do have to be composed of counseling activities, either face-to-face or online. This can include observing your site supervisor, conducting site visits, and providing counseling services to students' families. So that is our requirement that is specified in the CWA handbook. So again, that is an important piece. If virtual appointments are allowed, these should be counted in the CWA individual family or family conferences category in Toggle. If home visits are able to be conducted online, these would still count in your home visits category in Toggle. If connecting virtually is not allowed, but phone appointments are able to take place, you would count these in your CWA home calls category. And again, we encourage you to really sit down and have a conversation with your site supervisor once you're able to get a hold of them and find out what might be possible. There may be a need where they would say, well, I'm still trying to figure out my own process of doing these site visits or home visits or home calls with technology. You might ask, can I at least sit in on them, hear, observe? I don't need, that can all count towards your hours as well, as long as you are engaging in the process. So again, you might just have them think about including you in particular ways if it makes sense. And again, recognizing that that may not happen or may not be possible, then again, we will try to figure out options. At least 30 of your total hours for 530, as always, must be composed of interdisciplinary hours outside of the field of education, such as consulting with law enforcement, social services, child protective services, community-based orgs, as just a sample of different options. If you work in service delivery agencies, particularly, for example, if you work with behavioral intervention or drug and alcohol rehab, and you provide direct connection with consumers, you may be able to count your work and those hours towards this category. So I would encourage you to reach out to Professor Sherb or Professor Hernandez, depending upon which section you're in of CWA, to talk directly about that. If you volunteer and run a group somewhere, if you do some work that may be focused around individual or group counseling in sort of a broad sense, talk with your instructors and see and figure out and consult and see if they might be able to sort of count those hours in that category. It may be possible. Additionally, there is the option, as my email said as well, if you are doing some research and work around crisis management and developing resources for the online and virtual learning, and particularly from a CWA perspective, that may also count in this area. So you, again, could reach out and talk with your university supervisor. But additionally, you might want to consult with your site supervisor too to find out if there is something that you can put together work that also will serve their site and their needs. Because again, we want, if you're going to be doing some research or program development, it would be best if it also is serving a direct need. And so that's another piece that I would offer. Additionally, your remaining hours for CWA can be professional development opportunities to supplement. And again, the hope here is that they're connected to CWA topics. And again, you should consult with your instructors about this specifically. So that is the presentation. One final piece here. For CWA folks who are working on that credential, I want to also remind you that this credential is entirely separate from your PPS credential and coursework, right? So I've gotten this question already from a few folks worried about their CWA site and how that connects with their master's degree and the PPS credential. These are two entirely separate pieces, right? So while I would encourage folks, I am going to encourage folks to really think about doing whatever they can to up the numbers that they have if you are simultaneously doing 534 and 540, to really do as much to fill the 534 class and those requirements as possible, because you can take an incomplete for the 540 class. If you have difficulty with your particular site, you can finish those hours in the fall semester. And once you've met your 150 hours, you can be recommended by Christina Soria in the credential office for the Grad School of Ed to the CTC, and you will then get your CWA requirement. You may be eligible to still complete the variable term waiver for the CWA credential as well. But again, we're needing a little bit more clarity from the CTC about what that's going to look like in terms of that piece. And additionally, I would also say, for those of you who will become full-time school counselors, I do want to stress that it may be a challenge to then navigate full-time work as a school counselor and then trying to finish up like multiple component parts here. So I'm just wanting folks to be really thoughtful about how to manage time if taking advantage of two different variable term waivers. So again, I know everybody's in a unique spot because everybody has different things that are possible and aren't possible, but just wanting to put that piece out there. Okay. So at this point, we are moving now into just having some open conversation. You can, in the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you can feel free to send in a message on chat if you would like, or you can unmute yourself in the upper right-hand corner of your little text box with your name, ask your question, and we will try to answer it as much as possible. Any questions that we can answer for folks?
Hi, Dr. T.
Hi there.
Hi. In regards to the interdisciplinary hours, would my PSA counselor suggest ask me if I could like put together PowerPoints for parents?
Mhm.
Is that something I can put under?
Yes, so in our mind, that would be entirely appropriate. Doing that type of research, creating those types of resources, and making them available. Absolutely, that would work in our mind. And then counting all of those hours that you're spending on that, and putting it into that category. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Hi, Dr. T.
Hi.
So you mentioned that for I think 528, the breakdown of the hours.
Yes.
So you said that our supervisors might have some flexibility to work with us. So like, for example, if I could not meet that breakdown, like would I be able to like negotiate that? Because I know for sure like there's other people in the program too, like there's just no way we can do that.
Mhm. So the biggest thing is that you should definitely be in touch with your university supervisor, and you can also see me on that, as well as the interim fieldwork coordinator for PPS. The biggest thing is that we have to have you at some point meet that hour requirement. We can't just necessarily let go of the 100 hours. So one of the things that we can do is look at doing an incomplete and having you continue hours, if there's some flexibility over the summer or in the fall, or we can take a look at other options as well. We can't necessarily, we have some flexibility, but we probably can't have like all of your hours can be professional development, right? So we would need to talk on an individual one-on-one basis with folks who are really having some particular issues of having access to site or having access to being able to do any sort of online or individual counseling, or at the very least, not also being allowed to sit in and observe their supervisor engaging in any of that work, right? So yeah, so again, I would just shoot us an email, Stephanie, and we can talk through some of those questions offline.
Okay, thank you.
Mercedes, sorry, let's see. I'm going to go in order that they came in. Sorry, Genesis. So would we have to pay for another semester if we decided to take an incomplete for CWA and finish the hours in the fall? No. You are already paying for the class. All of the coursework will need to be finished this semester for CWA. So essentially, as long as you have completed all assignments, as long as you have a formative evaluation, as long as you have submitted and you have a site visit form on record, the only thing that remains that would need to be open would be your field log, and you would then submit that once you finished your hours in the fall back to your respective instructor, and then they would issue a change of grade request to the registrar's office on your behalf. And then at that point, you can then apply for recommendation for your credential in the credentialing office in the Grad School of Ed. So there is not an additional fee that you would need to have if you decided to take an incomplete and extend and finish your hours in the fall. That's not a problem whatsoever. Mercedes is asking, is the 50% of the counseling hours per course, or is it for the total 600 hours? So yes, so it is just for the courses that you are in this semester. It is not for all 600 hours. So whatever is happening right now, that's what we're providing that percentage breakdown for. That's the only thing that you're having to focus in on. So if you've had previous fieldwork courses already done, those hours still maintain the same. They don't get changed at all. It is just for any fieldwork course that you are presently in spring 2020, where we are adjusting to have this percentage breakdown. And again, if there is a concern, you can speak with your respective instructor and then also see me, and we can work on an individual case basis around any concerns that you have about that. Another question is there a deadline for the variable term waiver? I am sure that there will be, but again, we don't have information yet from the CTC about what that process is going to look like. It's still very early on. They have just asked institutions to submit to say that they want to take advantage of this. So there will be a follow-up email that you will get from me or Dean Hillis indicating when deadlines will be if you wish to take advantage of that. So more information will come as we move forward, I promise. For PPS students, I believe there's a requirement for us to be observed by university supervisor. Let's see. Individual counseling, group counseling, consultation throughout. When we do the VTW, do we still need to make sure we complete our remaining requirement with the VTW? For instance, I completed individual group counseling in previous courses. Do I need to be observed during a consultation with? No. So ultimately, in terms of the waiver itself, it is just about the requirements that were issued. So it would be about hours or testing and some other pieces that, like for teaching programs and teaching prep programs, they have a couple other pieces, but this is just going to cover some of those pieces. So it wouldn't necessarily be some of the specifics. It would be more about the hour number is what you have to finish within the next year if you took the variable term waiver option. So, that's okay. And we will allow that. So when adding hours from the prior observation assignments, how should we add this in Toggle? It's a great question. Ultimately, in Toggle, you should add it into whichever category that it shows up. So if it's the individual personal counseling or the group and group counseling or academic and career, you can put those in. There should be an option in Toggle to note that. So you can put in a note that said observation hours from 526 assignment, and you can note that roughly on the days that it was for. It will show up in your log, and we will take it at that. If you want to also just put it on a random day in this semester and just have a notation in there that it's for that specific assignment, that's probably okay too. I don't think that we're going to have issues with the nitty-gritty as long as it's specified as a notation that it is from a previous semester. So again, I would say it's your call. Maybe consult with your individual faculty member teaching your fieldwork class about if they have a preference. But to me, I really will leave that up to them. So yeah, I'll pass that along and ask them to make a decision of how they best want to see those hours, because they are the ones who have to verify it. So another question is summer session at Cal Lutheran still happening? So it's a great question. Yes, to our knowledge, it is still happening. I know that the cabinet is talking still about whether it will be face-to-face or online instruction only. I do not have an answer about that. I do not know what those conversations are like right now and where we will fall out with that. But I have been told that hopefully a decision will be made sooner rather than later about that. So I don't know what that will mean in terms of the possibility of fieldwork hours to be conducted if schools are shut down, particularly K through 12 schools. So I know at least one of you has done a petition to have summer fieldwork because you found a placement. I would encourage you to reach out to your proposed site supervisor to see if they have any indication of how their summer school program will work this summer. It may be that given the California school superintendent decision that face-to-face instruction in K through 12 schools will not happen until at least August, that it may be that folks will not have summer classes or provide summer counseling, which then I know may affect some of you in terms of moving forward with with your work this summer, I would again encourage you to reach out to your site supervisors and get some clarity about that. And again, we can talk more offline about that as you get more information. Okay, so another question about CWA. Would the hours in the fall need to be completed at the current site that we are at, or is there flexibility to do them at a full-time counseling position if hired by then? Most likely, our expectation would be that we would need to have them be at the site that you are at so that there's continuity and that you also are having ongoing site supervision as a part of that, because that will be required and they need to verify that your hours are continuing. I will bring that back to the full faculty to have a conversation though about that, and we can have more of a conversation and hopefully get back to you about that. But my guess is that we would want to have some level of consistency based upon the fact that you are still being supervised and still would need to be completing hours. Will the deadline to find a fieldwork placement for the fall be postponed since you're unable to interview with potential placements for the time being? We are extending the deadline for your fall placements. I know it was originally, I think the last Friday of May was the original deadline for fall 2020 placements. We are moving that out to August 1st. Again, if there is a need for extensions on that, you can contact myself about that throughout the summer. I'm happy to make time throughout the summer to also have conversations with folks needing to find a site. Again, I do anticipate that, you know, right now in the midst of everything, this will be a challenge, but we will figure out and folks will move into a pattern soon, and hopefully be able to do online interviewing and or phone interviews to hire interns. So I do imagine that folks will still have opportunities and possibilities. But again, I would probably say now is not the time to be reaching out about a fall placement. You know, we don't want to add undue stress to our colleagues out in the field. And so I would say you have some flexibility, you have some time. I will also be sharing that new extension in an upcoming email when I send out this link to all the students in Fieldwork. But yes, so you have until August 1st to submit applications for fall placements. And again, that deadline is in place because we also want to make sure that we have enough time for folks to be enrolled and then for you to be able to accrue your hours starting as of August 15th for fall placements. Another question that I got is, if we're graduating this May, will we need to complete an exit interview via Zoom? That's a great question. Yes, we are still planning on having folks complete their exit interviews. And in fact, that's particularly important for PPS students. It becomes an important piece for us because that's what we use to verify your fieldwork hours, and then that gets sent to Christina in the credentialing office to move forward on her recommendations to the state. So you will be contacted by, we will be sending out information as we get closer, but we can't do that until we have sort of final hours of placements in work. So you'll probably hear from us later in this month with encouragement to reach out and set up a time with your faculty advisor to do the exit interview that you'll need to do. And those will take place via Zoom. We also have a dynamic form that we'll be using this year for the first time to help have that be an online process and not on paper. I also got another question about, is dropping CWA without an incomplete an option? It's a good question. At this point, the add drop period has passed. And so what you potentially could do is do a W. I would need to check on this. So just do a withdraw from the course. But again, if you you do the W, you're still paying for the course. You can't get a refund on your coursework that you've already completed. So maybe if we could touch base, whoever asked that question, if you could send me an email, we can have a conversation offline to try to figure out where you're at with all of that and what might be a good option, because I don't want you to be out money or hours unnecessarily, and I want to be supportive of the choices that you need to make. Any chance this meeting can be counted towards our hours? Great question. I would need to check on that, but I will certainly let you know if it can be, and I'll share that in my upcoming email. Can the hours for field studies be extended until possibly June when the school year ends? Yes, absolutely. So that's actually part of the incomplete process that I was talking about. So, you know, if you know that you're not going to be able to do hours by the time May 15th rolls around, but you're still able to sort of count hours and do, then we can give an incomplete. And that just means that you won't, you can still be recommended for your credential once you hit your hours. And then not have to take the variable term waiver if you have met all of your hour requirements. It just would mean that it gets a little bit delayed from the normal, right? So you could be recommended after you finish that requirement. It also would mean that your degree technically would be posted probably in August rather than May or June by the registrar's office, partly because the incomplete will not allow you to actually get your formal graduation, right? So you would need to have that happen. But again, a verification letter of you being in good standing and that this is the last piece can be issued by Christina Soria in the credentialing office if you need that as you're applying for jobs. So that piece can certainly be in process, and again, could be something that you have as an option. You have an additional 2 weeks after the semester to make up hours for this semester. So I'm trying to understand that piece, sorry. So essentially, I think that was sort of a follow-up to what I just said. So yes, if you need more time and you can accrue more hours all the way through the academic year, you can take an incomplete for this semester's course that you're currently in and still accrue hours. You then would work with your university supervisor. The condition of the incomplete would be that you have to have all of your paperwork minus your field log, as well as and that's the only thing that's left to turn in, and all of your assignments have to be completed this semester before mid-May. But you can have your instructor give you an incomplete, and you can continue to accrue hours for the remainder of the academic year at your school site, and that is a possibility. You also are still allowed to simultaneously, if you're starting a summer project or summer hours, you can simultaneously start that process. You can still have an incomplete and be allowed to start a new fieldwork experience and start hours at a new site for the next class in your sequence. So in that particular case, I know this is one of the students who's asking and planning on doing summer site work with summer school. So yes, you can simultaneously do both. Okay, another question is, would it be possible to count reading, books and articles and other professional development materials to be considered as hours that you count? So again, I would defer you to your university supervisor, whoever's teaching your fieldwork experience. If it is definitely connected to the work that's happening as school counselors and you can make that connection, I wholly support that. I don't think that's a bad thing. But again, you would want to get verification from your university supervisor who's teaching the class to ensure that that's okay. But I think that would be completely sufficient. It would be even better if you wanted to take it to the next step, that you would be able to then translate that into something that could be provided to your site to help them as a resource for parents, for their students that you're serving, in terms of what they're dealing with right now. So if that can be sort of a next level, that would be even better. But yes, you could certainly connect with that. The other question, another question coming in, can interdisciplinary hours be applied to field studies too as counseling hours, such as running group? Yes, absolutely. So as long as you are doing individual or group counseling, you're connecting with folks, you're doing client-centered work, those hours can be counted towards those interdisciplinary hours. Will taking an incomplete affect us negatively? No. In fact, it won't negatively affect you unless an incomplete down the line, if you haven't finished an incomplete by, I believe, the semester after you have needed to take the incomplete, it may turn into an F. So we would want you to be working on that diligently to do what you need to do to finish up that internship. So largely the hours in that following semester. So if you needed to take, let's see, if you are taking an incomplete, or probably what I would encourage faculty to do is give you an in progress rather than incomplete. So I'm using the language of incomplete, but we would work with all of the fieldwork instructors to know that they should do an in progress. An in progress allows more flexibility, and so you would need to finish up those hours within the fall semester, and then once you have the instructor, as soon as you have finished that, you would complete the field log, submit it to your faculty member, and then they can process for your ability to have a grade change. If they aren't available or they're not responding quickly enough, you can certainly send that to me as department chair as well. So I'll just put that out there. We can definitely work to support that. But an incomplete is not a negative thing at all. Many students have to do an incomplete because they do need to finish hours. We do this all the time in the CSP program. No one sees it because ultimately it gets changed on your transcript, and it's not going to be something that shows there at the end that you had an incomplete, because what they'll actually see is the grade that's been changed in the end, unless you don't proactively work with your faculty member and don't change it, which again, our hope is that that's not going to be the case. So hopefully that helps that fear. In regards to the practicum course and completing the observation, I believe you mentioned that we may opt to hold a conference with our supervisors. Is this correct? Yes. So in terms of practicum or any of the other fieldwork courses, if it's not possible right now for you to have a full site visit, that is our preference, of course. But if you can't, if you're not allowed to do active hours of a presentation or a consultation or doing counseling, direct counseling with students, we are just requiring that by the time the semester ends in mid-May, that you have documented a site visit form between your university supervisor, those teaching the fieldwork course that you're in, your site supervisor, and yourself. And that can take place via phone, or it can take place via video conference. We're just asking that that is a short conversation. I anticipate that these would be 15 minutes to 20 minutes in length. Some might go a little bit more, some might be even a little bit less. But that's really what we're asking for folks to have on file for their observation or site visit for this particular semester, given what's going on in the field and site supervisors' availability. A follow-up question to, can we read a book or an article and translate that into professional development? If we did translate our learning into something that would help our sites, what would be the limit of the hours we could count towards this work? So that piece would fall into the resource development category. So the 25% of your hours that we're asking for this particular course that you're in, that would fall into that category. So if you're doing something that you are reading or you're doing some research on that would fall into that specific category of toggle and count towards that 25% if you're in 528, 533, or 534. And if you are doing the if you're doing the CWA class, it would fall into the interdisciplinary hours. So that's the breakdown for both of those. So the one question that I have, and I might ask for a little bit of clarity on this, is can you clarify the requirements for CWA? So for CWA, again, you must complete out of the total 150 total hours, 90 of them need to be composed of counseling activities, either face-to-face or online counseling. This could include observing your site supervisor. Another part of those hours are 30 have to be interdisciplinary hours. So, and this is outside of the field of education. So working with law enforcement, social services, child protective services, community-based organizations. So if you're doing some of the research on a topic for your site that's related to CWA, you could fold it into that work. If you come up and create a resource binder for emergency preparedness or responding to students' needs in the time of a pandemic, and you provide that to your site and you put lots of information in, that can be something that you could create and count those hours towards this category. But additionally, if you work in service delivery agencies or nonprofit organizations, do volunteering with community-based organizations, and you provide direct connection with students or families, and you're practicing your skills, you may be able to count those hours towards your 30 total hours that you need here. And again, you can consult your 540 instructors about this. The 30 is an at least. So for this category of interdisciplinary hours, you need at least 30. You can do more than that towards the 150, but you need to have at least 30. And then additionally, we are providing the same piece for all of the other coursework for you to do professional development opportunities. Now, the one thing that I want to say here is you can't double dip. So if you do professional development opportunities, you have to choose, is that going to be for your 540 class, or is that going to be for 534 if you're simultaneously enrolled in both? You can't double dip, and you can't count those webinars or trainings or things that you're doing for both of your experiences. They need to be separated. And unfortunately, we just have to keep that clarity for the documentation for your hours. Hopefully that helps answer the question. If there are more specific questions, though, please feel free to either write in or contact me offline, and I'm happy to follow up. Another question, in my professional job had me conducting group work with students this semester with skills through this program. Can these be counted towards your field studies hours, or does it have to be completed within the scope of your field studies hours? For your, I'm going to actually ask if Dr. Yu might be able to unmute herself and help me out with this piece. Is it possible to have that, or does it have to be completed within the scope of your field studies site?
Yeah, that's a good question. Within the field studies requirements and regulations, it does say that, you know, up to 200 hours of the 600 field studies hours may be done and completed off-site. The only caveat is that has to be with the permission of your site supervisor. So I believe that if you made a case with your site supervisor that, hey, I was working with these students, I was doing group work, and through that group work, I learned these new skills that I'm bringing over to, or that I have brought over to the site, that would be something that the site supervisor could approve and therefore sign off on your log.
Thank you.
Sure.
A clarification for the in progress. So if you do take an in progress, you have a full year to make up the work of that. So it wouldn't even have to be just until next fall to complete. You could take all the way up until next spring to complete your hours and then have a change of grade. Of course, we know that for folks who are graduating, you certainly would, this is probably more of a concern for folks who are in practicum, who are continuing and then will have extra time. But that is just a piece to be clear about. Another question that has come in, for practicum, I did an additional 100 hours. Would it be possible to count that for field studies too? It's a great question. At this point, we haven't allowed that, but I will take that back to the faculty. We will have a conversation about that, and certainly I will let folks know if that is something that we are able to do. At this point, we have only allowed for, if it's an academic assignment, for hours to be counted in. But again, we will think about that and be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to give a decision on my own. And given that not all of the faculty are here, we would need to have a little bit more time to discuss that piece. But I promise that I will follow up on that. Sure. So another question that came in, can you clarify what can count towards the 50% of counseling activities again? Sure. So if you have supervised or you have observed your site supervisor providing counseling to students, families, consultations, that can count. If you have done that work yourself, that can count. If you have done assignments in previous semesters, if you're in practicum only, and you have needed to meet with students, or you have needed to practice, needed to do a counselor observation and follow-up interview, all of those hours can count towards those 50% of hours. If you are in a placement where you are helping to supervise student workers, or you're engaging in one-on-one conversations around people's work, then that may be able to be counted. If you are doing anything where you are providing virtual or online counseling, or may be able to do that in this following weeks after our phone call tonight, all of those things can be counted towards that 50%. And so again, whatever course you're in, it's 50% of the total hours that are required for that course. So I know this is coming from someone who's in practicum, but I also want to specify, if you are in 534, it's whatever that 50% is, it's only of the 50% that you have required for that specific course. So you already have your hours completed from 533. Whatever is left of your total hours that you need to reach the 600 total hours, then it's 50% of that number. So everybody's number of what the percentage is looks different. And that's why we provided percentages, not a specific hour, because some folks might have done 400 hours in 533, or some folks only did 200. So to give a total number that everybody has to do, that would make it much more difficult. So that's why we're giving you these percentage ranges. And again, some flexibility to consult with your supervisor, or I'm sorry, your university supervisor, and also me, if you'd like, as the interim PPS fieldwork coordinator, to then make some decisions about what can be flexed out there. Again, the question of, does it have to be from the semester in terms of those hours? Again, we will check in on this as a faculty and make some decisions. If you completed outside agency group work last semester that you couldn't use in the fall, can you count them now? We'll need to make a decision on that as a faculty, and I will send out a follow-up update with that information once we have more conversation about that as a faculty. But again, I can't unilaterally make that decision right here, right now, but I promise that we will follow up on that. Any further questions that folks have? Those are all the questions in the chat right now, but I want to make sure that we give at least a couple of pauses in case folks want to jump in and ask a question or are still typing. So I'm not seeing anything further come in. If there are further questions, again invite you to speak with your university supervisor, whoever is teaching your fieldwork course. If you have additional questions, you can also loop me in on that, and have a conversation. So one piece that did just come in, can we graduate and come back in the spring for the CWA course? Yes, absolutely. That is always an option. So we've always allowed for that. Any student who goes through the PPS program is automatically eligible to come back. They just have to reapply with grad admissions, and speak with Michelle Sacedo over there, and then take that class. Is it an extra cost? It is an extra cost if you haven't taken the class already, right? So if you're already in the class, part of what I'm encouraging folks to do is do that in progress, because then you can have that year to finish up any hours and then be eligible to be recommended. If you haven't yet taken 540, it is always offered in the spring semester. You can always take it next spring or the spring after, whenever there are some folks who are currently in 540 who have graduated 5 years ago and have returned this year to do the course and the fieldwork. It is just the units that you're paying for just the fieldwork course. That's the only cost that's associated with the CWA credential. So hopefully that explains those two questions that came in. Any other final questions that folks have? So again, thank you for spending some time on this Friday evening with me, and I hope that I've been able to answer most of your concerns. I'm sure that there are others that I have not. And there are still some questions that we have to then follow up. I promise that I will do that. We will have continued conversations. We have a department meeting scheduled for this coming week. We also will await the outcome of the CTC's meeting later this month, to have more information to share with you. So there will be more updates that you'll get as April continues on. If you have questions, please loop me in with your university supervisors so that way we can help assist you as much as we can. And again, I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your flexibility. I know that this is anxiety provoking and sometimes frustrating. It's frustrating and anxiety provoking for me too. I've had to have a very quick crash course on lots of intricacies of the PPS program, but I'm trying my best, and I know my colleagues are too, and we want to let you know that we of course are always here to support you and want the best for you. So please know that we're doing what we can as we move forward. And again, always happy to respond to emails and questions that come in. So again, we will send this recording out so folks have it. You will be able to access it and go back if you have questions. And again, thank you so much. And stay safe out there. Much love to you, your families, and hopefully we can continue to do some good and take care of one another as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.